You left Princeton and you immediately landed one of the most coveted jobs in the world, especially like in the mid 2010s. I feel like Google just had this aura around it of like the place to work. It was the height of the Googleplex, the height of the SaaS transition, the growth in cloud computing, and you were a PM right in the heart of it in Mountain View. So tell us a little bit about how that was and like what you learned about a world-class organization by being at Google.
I was really grateful. The Google APM program was like just a bunch of really smart people, really cool people that all work at Google, and you get to be friends with them and learn from them. In addition to like, so everyone is in a different little org, and so you go kind of get to cross-pollinate across the different organizations, which is really awesome. Yeah, I had a great time. I worked on Google Search the first year, and it's also really cool to work on the product that is the most important product to the company. So I was like at Google in the Mountain View office, as you said, working on Google Search, which is the most important product. And yeah, it was just, honestly, it felt like grad school. It felt like what I maybe could have gotten from grad school. It's like I'm learning what it's like to work. There's a lot of smart, nice, kind people around me. We're at a company that has a lot of, honestly, money and flexibility and high profit margins, which allows us to like take a lot of fun bets. And I got to do projects that I came up with and implemented and things like that. So I thought it was awesome. I'm very grateful to Google and to my experience there. And I know it's changed, or the world has changed in a lot of ways, but I still hold a very, I think, being able to go work at a big company, seeing how that all works is very impactful for me, even though the rest of my life I've spent it in startups and small businesses.
Yeah. Yeah, because you just get to like see patterns of something that worked. And that doesn't mean it's the only thing that works, but it's like you're seeing an evolutionary blueprint for an organization that's clearly doing something excellent. And so what are some of those lessons that you've taken on to the startup world, to Exponent, to the company that the companies that you've worked on since then?
I think Google had a really good, Google had some good, I learned some good things and some bad things. So maybe to start off the bad thing, like bureaucracy slows down progress for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, Google tries its best, but like there were so many approvers on things, so many like, you know, policies, VPs that have egos that need to be involved in stuff. And what I realized is that the best product managers are the ones who are able to circumnavigate the bureaucracy. So it's almost like they create red tape and then they rewards the people who know how to navigate around the red tape. And the people who have to go through all the red tape are the ones who suffer and don't accelerate their careers and their products and things like that. And so I think that was a really valuable lesson, because now, even in startup world, if someone asks me like, you know, oh, we have to do these, you know, sometimes we go to, I won't say specifics, but we have to like get through approvals for certain things from different organizations we partner with. And I think naively I would have been like, okay, I have to go through these approvals. But now my thought is, okay, how do I get around these approvals as quickly as possible? And it's not in a way that's like malicious to the organization. It's more like, we don't really need to do like 5 security reviews. We're not that cost sophisticated of a company. So who do I need to talk to, and how do I navigate the system such that I can get around that, basically? And so circumventing policies is one thing. The other positive thing that I think I learned from Google is really an orientation toward experimentation. I think Google, as big as it is, does a really good job of celebrating random ideas. Like I launched so many features at Google. I launched Solitaire, Tic-Tac-Toe, Pac-Man. You can like Google all these things and like they will be little games and search that appear. Metronome, like all these stuff. And it's so cool because like that's not a business priority for anyone, like to launch a metronome in Google search, but it is like a really fun project, like, and to be able to experiment, and some of these things do well, or some of these things end up really interesting use cases, like when they launch features that maybe are kid friendly or something like that. Like now there's a bunch of little games that kids can use. And so I think for me and internally at our company Exponent, we'll do hackathons internally. We'll celebrate random fun ideas. We'll always try these things because I think that there are net benefits generated beyond the metrics of the product that's launched. You know, even if it's team morale related and things like that. So I think those are just 2 things that I learned from Google.
For sure. And I've often seen companies that don't prioritize that sort of almost whimsy And some of those organizations are extraordinarily effective, but I do think it reduces the long-term potential and the long-term innovation, long-term sort of cultural creativity that exists. But it's a privilege to be able to do that. Like, you have to have a really solid core product and core base of profitability to be able to afford to have 20% of your time spent on something like building metronomes, even though I personally love music and I'm glad you did that. But something I think we could all learn a little bit from, though, is this concept of like circumventing red tape, because a lot of the analysts that I work with, they end up working at, Bank of America or Wells Fargo or JP Morgan, which are these massive companies with probably even more employees than Google, like a few 100,000 often. So massively bureaucratic. There's huge security concerns. There's massive like financial fraud risk and insider trading risk. And so everything just has red tape. How have you circumvented that? Like, what were some of, like, I don't know if you have a good story about a time when you circumvented red tape in order to get things done.
Yeah. I mean, I do it all the time, so I'm sure I have good stories. I would say, I mean, at Google, the simple thing was, instead of going through the, like, there's like a document you have to write, and then you have to go submit it, and then it goes through this thing, and then it goes to it eventually goes to a person. And the thing was, just if you ping the person, if you just call the person or talk to them and ask them like, what do you want me to put on this document, or like, what's important for me? And most people just will tell you exactly what you need to do, or like exactly how to get around it, because this goes back to like an insight that I've realized, is that like, there are humans on the other side of all these things, and the humans on the other side of all these things also don't want to do the bureaucracy. Like, they also find it boring to go through and like review all these documents, and like, some of them love bureaucracy, so it's not all of them, but a lot of the ones I talk to actually would rather just talk to me than read a document. And so that was my MO, was like, I would always just call the people on the list of things, or ping them, or try to get them in some meeting or something like that, just to avoid writing documents. And I actually, I don't know, this is less a story, just like a habit of mine, but whenever someone says like, oh, we should make a document for that, I actually am allergic to that. This is like my startup mentality, by the way, but I'm like, oh, as soon as you start writing a document, it becomes like this process thing, and then we have to like look at it, then everyone will comment on it, and then it'll become like a, everyone has their opinion and stuff like that. My preference is like, oh, let's just get into a meeting with the people who want to do it and make the decision in the meeting. So that works at startups as well as businesses. That doesn't work at Google as much.
I guess when the stake is billions of users and hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue and profit and whatever,
it's harder.
You probably have to make a very informed long-term decision. But I do think, though, that there's a kernel of truth here, which is that like, there are people behind processes, and they don't want to deal with the bureaucracy either. And so if you can point to them that like, this is a good idea, and like they get on board with that, then realistically, like, the red tape kind of disappears. And that's something that I think applies to a lot of these finance roles, because realistically, the best sort of junior folks are the ones who like get things done and do whatever like their team needs, regardless of how they exactly get there, as long as it's like in an ethical way. It's the results orientation that matters a lot. Let's tie back to the PM role specifically. So you chose to work in product management specifically, and I'm sure that you could have done all sorts of different roles within computer science coming out of Princeton. So what was the draw to PM specifically, and how did it prepare you to entrepreneurship? Like, would you recommend that future entrepreneurs build a career in a larger company doing some sort of PM role before launching on their own?
To be totally honest, the reason I did PM is because I was just switching to computer science. I didn't think I was that good of a coder. And I was like, what else can I do in tech? And so I was like, oh, there's this thing where it involves talking to people. Like, I'm pretty good at that. Like, let me do that plus tech. Yeah. And so that was honestly why I got into it. I had no idea what it was. I woefully, I wish I knew what it was more, because then I could have probably been even better in the interviews and stuff like that. But I once I found out what it was, I was very excited about it, because this was exactly the role that I like to play at the hackathon. This is like, I don't know if you do escape rooms, or I'm sure people in your audience have done an escape room. Like, I love to be the person that's like kind of coordinating, like talking to everyone, helping them figure out what their task is and things like that. But I actually like prefer the people stuff of it, than actually necessarily going into one task and figuring out that one puzzle for the escape room. Don't get me wrong, I love puzzles, but what I love more is this kind of like human coordination puzzle that's happening on a meta level in the escape room. And so for me, like that's what product management is like being that person in the escape room and like kind of like helping coordinate. You're not managing people, you're just kind of like coordinating work and communicating information across different parts of the team basically. And so yeah, so I really loved that. I think it did really prepare me for entrepreneurship in a lot of ways. I mean, you have to learn how to work with people, so there's a lot of people management skills that emerge from that. There's a lot of like product visioning, kind of user identification, pain point identification. Those problems are very helpful for entrepreneurs. But my honest advice is the person, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you could be an engineer. Like you totally could be an engineer. You totally could be an analyst. You could be a whatever. What's most important is actually like cultivating the skill set that you think is most valuable, most attuned to what your actual skill set is, basically. So if you're in an escape room, you're the person who goes solves puzzles. Go be a puzzle solver. Like go develop that career because that's what you're good at. That's what your skill is. And then maybe you'll partner or co-found the company with someone like me who's more on the other side. And so my advice still goes back to cultivating what your actual talents are. But I do think if people are considering careers, product management is a pretty good one because of how many hats you wear, how many different kind of adjacent to entrepreneurship skills you'll develop.
So I really want to double click on that before we get into your entrepreneurial journey and talk about Exponent. You're talking about this concept of like really leaning into your strengths. And this is something that I have heard a lot of different perspectives at. And at Stanford, there's a professor named Graham Weaver, as you know, who has this funny catchphrase that's like, would you rather water your flowers or pull your weeds? And so with the analogy being like, do you want to spend time like building the things that are going really well, or do you want to spend time getting rid of the weaknesses? And for most of my life, I spent time on the latter. Like I was pulling weeds constantly. Like if there was something I was bad at, I leaned into that. I did that more because I was bad at it. What do you think actually has driven most of your success? Is it watering your flowers or pulling your weeds?
I think, yeah, the times, I mean, definitely watering my flowers. Like the times that I try to run against when I'm good at, it's miserable. It's like painful for me. Like when I was a chemical engineering major and thought I wanted to do that, and I wanted to just be an engineer because that's basically what I was told to do. You know, what the Silicon Valley notion of success is, like being an engineer, doctor, blah, blah, blah. I was miserable. And then that misery is unproductive. Like it creates like friction. It creates aversion to the tasks that I'm working on, and then I'm worse at them. And so, you know, I think I could have done that. Like I certainly could have powered through. And I know there's like a lot of adages that are like, oh, like power through the pain and things like that. But I much more agree with what Graham Weaver says of like, hey, why don't you find the path of least resistance sometimes, honestly? And that actually is what you're uniquely good at. And so why would you deny the world this thing that you're so uniquely good at and kind of blunt that in favor of some kind of notion of well-roundedness or fixing your problems or something like that? So yeah, follow your strengths is maybe the TLDR.
Yeah, I like that. And the one sort of caveat I would add to that is there's another thinker who talks about like the constraints theory of success, where it's like you've got to always be solving for whatever the limiting constraint is in terms of getting what you're trying to done. And so sometimes I think that is like a weakness. So for example, like when I was recruiting for investment banking, I frankly didn't have that much accounting or finance background like right at the beginning. And so my skill was in the networking and the building relationships with people and the behavioral side of things. And so that was like operating at full speed. I was really trying to like water the flowers, like you were saying, but I also had to go back and like get rid of this constraint that would have stopped me from like letting that strength shine. So that might be my personal opinion on terms of adaptation, but I think I agree with you that it's way more fun and probably going to lead to better outcomes.
For sure. Yeah. No, I like that way of thinking.
So let's jump into the next chapter here, where you went and you founded something. You did the big thing. You jumped off into the path of entrepreneurship. And so start off by catching us up. Like I described Exponent earlier, but what is Exponent and what was the problem that you were originally setting out to solve with it? And as a side note, I'd love to hear about the journey in between Google and Exponent that you mentioned to me earlier.
Yeah, and they're related. So I left Google without actually a plan. I sort of was like, I want to explore the world a little bit more. I wanted to step back from corporate life. There was also just personal reasons that I wanted to take time off. And so I ended up buying a Toyota Prius and driving around the country for 2 years, just kind of visiting random like farms and hacker houses and dog sitting. And I was really just kind of living a very independent life, a very cost-free life. My goal was not to spend any money basically, or like to be net neutral with my money. And so I was taking up random jobs and things like that. It was definitely like a soul searching, like, you know, early 20s, like figure out kind of my life thing. I ended up inadvertently doing this thing that I really am grateful for, which is that I basically was exposing myself to so many different things. And then again, kind of checking with my gut of like, this feels good, this feels bad, like this feels good, this feels bad, and kind of following that intuition, and it led me somewhere.
Yeah.
Sort of like I sometimes have heard this, the random walk with bias, you know, this idea that like, it's kind of a random walk essentially. I'm like randomly going to different cities, but the bias is my preference. And so I'm like ending up going somewhere with it all. And so one of the things that I was doing to make money on the side was coaching people. I have always been interested in that ever since I was like, I don't know, ever since I was, I think, in high school, I was coaching people. I liked doing that. But I did it more in college, and I had casually coached people when I was at Google. And so then I started posting blog posts just about anything, like about career, about personal life, about whatever. And so one of the things that I was coaching people on was interviews, just because people seem to want that. And then I sort of, again, this random walk with bias, like I started to like, I was posting, I had this goal of posting one blog post every week for that year. And so then I started realizing my blog posts were doing better when I posted about interview prep. And so I started posting more of those, and then those started doing better and better. Yep. And then people started like reach out to me, be like, hey, do you have like coaching, or like, I'd love to get some tips, or blah, blah, blah. Like, how'd you get this job at Google? And so then just kind of accidentally, I fell backwards into a coaching job with myself. Basically, I was like running my own little coaching business just because I had so many people. And so that was kind of the start of Exponent, was really, truly stumbling into a pain point that I was able to solve, and finding my own product market fit with like myself and what people were wanting out of my content, basically.
Interesting. And so I love the way that you're describing this as like a business where you're the product and to some extent, and you're trying to find the fit with like what the market wants from Steven. And that goes back to what we we're just talking about watering your flowers and like really leaning into those strengths. And for me, honestly, it was kind of the same story where like I coached, people seemed to like it, and I continued to coach more and more, and until it just became obvious that that was like kind of what I needed to do with my full-time career. And so tell me a little bit more about like what the pain point is on their side of things though. Like, why were people needing support for this? And then maybe we can start to talk a little bit about the role of the university and like how that's playing into it.
Yeah. So I think what was very ripe at the time for the pain point is that interview, like in my opinion, at least, in a career journey, interviewing is the biggest pain point. It's the most stressful, most anxiety inducing, and in most ways, highest leverage part of someone's career journey. Because if you make or break that interview, all of a sudden you've unlocked an entire career. Yeah. And so there's this focus, we relentlessly focus on that specific pain point. There's a lot of things actually in the market at the time about like how to be a product manager, how to get better at being a product manager, blah, blah, blah. But we focus on, no, we want to help you with this one really annoying thing. And it happened at the time that tech was becoming a lot more popular to work at. People were really interested in product management as a career. And so I think we kind of hit this really nice time in the market where PM was growing, tech was growing, interviews are hard, and we really addressed that pain point. And I mean, kind of maybe where you're going is that universities were not solving this problem. Universities were solving the problem already of, oh, well, here are the skills you need to become to be able to interview at this job. And universities were solving like how to get better at this job even, potentially. There was like graduate programs for product management, things like that. But there was no university class that I ever took that helped me with interviewing. There was no career center that actually really knew the interviews and was able to practice them with me. And so I think that it was a failure of the university system also that bred the necessity for this pain point to be solved.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think that's kind of been the same situation with finance careers too. And so in any of these situations where you have these highly competitive careers where there's a lot more demand for very few positions, there's just going to be an increase in competitiveness. And universities are kind of operating on a little bit of a model that hasn't changed in the last 10 or 20 years or something like that. And so they're teaching you how to get a job back when it was way, way easier to get one of these jobs. And in particular for the interviewing side of things, like I don't think universities have ever really specialized on interview prep so much as like learning the core abstract concepts. And when so many of these jobs expect you to be able to have the technical and like sort of interviewing specific skill sets to succeed in those processes, like there's just a gap in the market. And so honestly, like Wall Street Mastermind, I see as a very parallel story where it was founded around the same time and sort of fits into a gap in the interview or in the university skill set, helping people to like get those interviews and succeed in those interviews in a way that just like career centers just can't do, because they're supporting so many thousands of students in so many different types of careers that you have to have specialization, and they can't afford to have specialization. And so I think it makes a lot of sense cognitively to me why these organizations like Exponent and Wall Street Mastermind exist, because there's just a gap in the market where it does not make sense from a scale perspective for a university to have a custom tailored program for interviewing for every single possible career that their students could have. It just like doesn't make sense economically, you know?
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, the challenge of the university was never set up to do this in general. The university was never really set up to be like a job sourcing or job producing thing, or at least originally, especially for universities. In fact, two-year universities like community colleges are much better at that in some ways than four-year universities. And I think you're totally right. The dynamics in the market make it such that there's a lot of people who want this job, there's a lot of demand, but there's not enough resources on actually how do you get good at doing this. And the most similar thing, actually, I think to me is like SAT prep and ACT prep. That also high schools don't have like they don't have like a class on that or anything like that. So
yeah. Funny enough, I think that my high school did actually eventually develop an ACT prep class, and so I think maybe the high schools have an advantage though, because everyone has to take the ACT. It's not like they had to prepare every single student for like 100 different tests and stuff. And so it's just feasible in a way that's not in university.
Right.
But I also want to hear about this like mental shift that you went through. So you were kind of going around, you fell backwards, as you describe it, into a career in coaching. And so at what point did you feel comfortable enough to like take the leap into your own adventure? Or maybe honestly, the better question is like, what made you feel comfortable enough to leave Google? Like to leave a place of security where I'm sure you were making like six figures. You had the golden star-striped resume. You were coming from Princeton, great grades, going to Google, prestigious thing, probably doing well at it. How did you decide to make that leap?
It was, yeah, I mean, looking back, I'm like, wow, I had some bold, I had a bold intuition about that. Like I was just going to go and leave Google. Like, and I think a lot of my friends were kind of concerned at the time. They're like, why are you doing that? Are you okay? Like these kinds of things. Honestly, the reason I left Google was not to make a company. The reason I left Google was truly for my own personal enrichment and exploration. And I think I never really growing up in the Bay Area and going to Princeton immediately after that, I never really got time to like breathe in my career. And so, if possible for people, and I really do think it's possible for a lot of people, because I did it with basically, I didn't have that much money, and I didn't really spend that much money. I was able to like do these kind of like woofing and these workaway things, basically where you work on farms in exchange for room and board. So you can be net neutral on your expenses. But I think I was just really craving exposure to the world and stepping out of myself and learning about the world and things like that. And so, and I think it's so cool to me personally that desire to leave Google and to go explore the world and to go understand myself and go on this soul searching journey actually eventually led me to build a company that I'm actually really proud of. And so like, it's so weird because you would think that you should stay there, go climb the corporate ladder, then immediately go build a company from there, get a bunch of VC funding, blah, blah, blah. But this just wasn't my path. My path was more soul searching and things like that. And so honestly, like that, I felt this strong desire to leave the Bay Area to like go explore, and that was what drove me to do that. Yeah,
drove you specifically to the Midwest, it sounds like.
Yeah. I literally drove to the Midwest, and I went to 45 states in those 2 years. So I drove all around the U.S. Yeah,
that's incredible. Any good side stories for us there about that road trip while we're here?
I think I'm trying to think what's most relevant. I think it was very impactful to meet people that were in different. Like, I think growing up in the Bay Area, you think everything is tech and everyone cares about tech. But people care about tons of different stuff. And so I think getting more intimate with the human experience, like human people and the struggles that they're going through, I think actually in some ways, helped me in lots and lots of ways, but relevant to this conversation, I think it helped me understand the role of a job in people's lives and like how much a job and how much income and changing your income level and things like that can really dramatically change your lifestyle and your living situation. Because some of the people I met were struggling with that or had gotten a job and then it changed their life in lots of ways. And so understanding the economic mobility and like that, the impact that has on people's lives, I think was more felt intimately for me when I was driving around and stuff.
Yeah. I've experienced some similar things. One of the beautiful logistical hurdles of going to Stanford and Harvard is it means I have to drive across the country every so often. And so I've managed to hit a lot of states and a lot of places that most people probably haven't visited, similar to yourself, it sounds like. And I think that has made me even more grateful in some ways for the role that like investment banking has played in my life, where it did enable me to achieve some economic mobility coming from one of those states that most people just kind of drive through or fly over. And then sort of achieving the freedom, the financial freedom and the capacity to do whatever I want with my life and in a much more real way. And so definitely agree for those who are like lacking additional motivation to seek these careers, like seeing some of the differences that it can make by connecting with more people and like seeing the range of human experience outside of like these elite universities that you went to and that I've been to in some respects does help you understand like how important and how cool a lot of these career opportunities can be.